Like, share, and subscribe to my channel as I continue to provide you trusted information for you to use to make decisions. I want to deal with an issue that a number of persons I want to deal with, and I understand why this is difficult to speak of because it is where an individual harm himself or herself to the point where he no or she no is no longer alive, and therefore there's a taboo somewhat in many parts of the world, particularly in Jamaica, to deal with the matter of suicide, but it's something we have to deal with, and I want to deal with it today. So my topic is suicide in Jamaica. I want to look at the realities of suicide in Jamaica from a 2 decade period, that is from 2000 to 2019. Now let us begin with this matter. Now, suicide is an act, all right, where an individual takes his or her life. And this may be as a result of varying things. It could be as a result of a demographic issue, it could be as a result of a biological issue, a psychological issue, an environmental issue, or any other social thing that may occur around or in the space of an individual to cause him or to influence him or her to actually what take his or her life. All right. Now, when you look at this, suicide is not something that comes across positive or is something that is actually considered positive, because what happens that is where the individual harms himself to the point where he is or she is no longer alive. All right. We'll look at macro trend. Macro trend gave us some things by saying that suicide rate in Jamaica is 1.9 to 2.4% over 22-year period, whereas many other countries in the Caribbean are not seeing that high rate of suicide. Nevertheless, it's a reality that we have to deal with as a people, and something that cannot be avoided or swept under the carpet, because if it is happening, it is real. And if it's real, we need to deal with it as a people. Now, Durkheim was the first person to actually look at suicide from an empirical perspective. And that is actually out there, where Durkheim looked at suicide from a macro perspective. And he actually argued that suicide is actually created by an environment that fosters that sort of behavior, that sort of attitude, that sort of expression from an individual. So, like Durkheim, we are going to be studying suicide from an empirical perspective to let you understand clearly where I want to go with my issue. And we need to understand clearly, like in every theory, it governs by a particular way. Now, my theory is also saying that suicide is really a macro phenomenon, like Durkheim, but I also want to include something else inside this discussion apart from the macroeconomic environment that Durkheim spoke about. So, here's my argument. My argument is suicide is affected by macroeconomic factors, as argued by Durkheim, and those macroeconomic factors for me are poverty and unemployment. And I want to know, include inside this discussion now, homicide. Is homicide influencing suicide behavior among Jamaicans? No. Data was actually garnered, collected from Jamaica Constabulary Force, as well as the Statistical Institute of Jamaica, where information is actually obtained inside a copy of a publication from this department that looks at it. So we want to actually look at it from that perspective and see what is happening. So the data is going to be entered into SPSS as well as Excel. So we're going to try to create some models, look at it in terms of some patterns as well as some statistical analysis as well as that. Now, you may ask, how sure are you that the data is correct? Suicides are investigated by the police across the 14 parishes of Jamaica. That is, the police has total jurisdiction over investigating and reporting suicide data. And that is actually the rationale why I am saying here that this is the best data source to use on the matter, because it's coming straight from the authority that deals with it. Now, suicide, as we said before, is an act of consciously taking one's life, arising from whatever situation that there is. And there are some cases where we consider as murder, suicide. Some things are considered as homicide, suicides. All right, so we need to understand clearly that those are some things. So we're let's go look at this suicide now. We're saying now suicide, we're looking for suicide from as far back as 2000 to 2019. And what you will realize that in 2005, the suicide increased by 440% over the previous year, which means that suicide skyrocketed in 2005. What environment occurred in 2005? That is something that we need to also look at. But we're also saying, if you realize from the figures in Jamaica, that suicide is fundamentally a male phenomenon. And the figures are there in terms of the sex ratio that looks at suicide to say that suicide is a male phenomenon in Jamaica. Substantially more men are committing suicide than their female counterpart or females. Now, here it is that we look at suicide now in terms of over the period in terms of both genders as well as overall. So the blue represents 2000 to 2009 with a 10-year period, and 2010 to 2019 is represented by the yellow. All right, so you can sort of see what is happening in terms of suicide in Jamaica in terms of those two periods. You realize that suicide in terms of those two periods in Jamaica are relatively the same. All right, same in terms of total number of cases recorded by the Jamaica Constabulary Force. Now, what we also do, we can look at suicide in terms of some 5-year intervals to sort of see what is actually happening. So you'll realize from 2000 to 2004, 2005 to 2009, 2010, 2014, 2015 to 2019, we'll realize that suicide, we are saying, is a substantially a male phenomenon. But not only that, we realize that the rate in terms of suicide is sort of trending up in terms of the number of males. Initially, we start 2000, 2004 with 81% in terms of suicide. Then we are now at almost 90% in terms of suicide being recorded as a male phenomenon. All right, which means marginally less females are committing suicide over those 5-year periods. Now, we can also look at suicide here in terms of the 5-year periods as well as by gender, and look to sort of see what is actually going on in terms of the number of suicide cases, males versus females. As we said, this matter is fundamentally a male phenomenon. So suicide is a male phenomenon in Jamaica. Why are the males unalive themselves at the rate that they are doing? We are uncertain, but what we do know is a reality in Jamaica. Now we look at the rate of suicide in Jamaica. Remember, we said that macro trends indicate that suicide ranges from 1.9% to 2.4%, which is here the case in Jamaica. And we are seeing here that I did the calculations here to look at Jamaica's mid-year population and look at suicide per 100,000. What does that mean? It means that for every 100,000 persons in Jamaica, starting with 2000, approximately 3 persons would kill themselves, male and female. And in 2019, the rate is 2.06 per 100,000. All right. So I was said before, those rates that we're actually looking at here in terms of suicide are higher than that of many other Caribbean islands. However, what we do know is that something must be done to look at this matter. We said before that suicide is fundamentally a male phenomenon, and the figures are here in Jamaica.